Yo, this your man KD, and this gonna be a different type of video, right? So it's the last day of Black History Month, so I decided to sit there and just put a little something together, and you know what I'm saying, just my ode to Black History Month. You feel me? Especially since they sitting there talking about we might not never have one of these again. Who knows? But this is my little contribution. So you already know the spill. You know the procedure. Roll your bleezies up. Get you something nice to sip on. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Nothing more American than black folks. That's just facts. Built this whole damn country for free. Every brick, every rail, every road laid with blood and sweat that never got a paycheck. And what did they get in return? Chains, whips, red lines, nooses, Jim Crow, COINTELPRO, prisons, knees on necks, bullets in backs. Ain't no other group forced to love a country that hates them like this. That's strength. That's America. 400 years of free labor built the economy. Cotton alone was worth $3 billion in 1860. That is trillions today. Wall Street, founded on slave trade. The White House, built by enslaved hands. Every dollar ever printed got black labor backed into it. But tell a racist that and they act like it's a history opinion. They fought in every war. Crispus Attucks bled first for this country in 1770. Black soldiers saved America in the Civil War. Hell, World War II fought Hitler while getting lynched at home. Vietnam drafted in disproportionate numbers. The thanks they got: GI Bills blocked, housing loans denied, neighborhoods flooded with heroin by their own government. Look it up. And you still got racists yelling, "Go back to Africa," like they ain't the original stolen property. Malcolm X said it best. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock landed on us. Ain't that the truth? Black folks got every right to hate this place, but they stay. They fight. They create. They revolutionize. America wouldn't exist without them, and it damn sure would collapse without them.
If you didn't like geese before, I'm about to give you a new reason not to like them. Enslaved people didn't just have to escape overseers, dogs, and slave catchers. They also had to outsmart geese. These birds weren't just livestock. They were used as security alarms, a hidden tool of oppression during slavery. Geese are territorial, loud, and impossible to silence. Unlike dogs, they couldn't be bribed with food or scared into submission. And their piercing honks would alert enslavers and overseers if someone tried to escape. Some enslavers let geese patrol fences, barns, and roads, places where escapes were most likely. Their aggressive nature made it harder for enslaved people to slip away unnoticed. Unlike watchdogs, geese required no training. They instinctively defended their space. Enslaved people found ways to outmaneuver the geese, moving slowly and silently to avoid startling them, escaping during storms to cover the noise, and distracting them with food to keep them occupied. See, I bet y'all wasn't thinking about that, did you? Just always them damn geese. And this part of history is important to know because we see how every part of plantation life was designed to prevent escape. Even animals were used as tools of oppression. Yet enslaved people still resisted, strategized, and fought for freedom.
I once had a professor of mine working on my doctorate tell me that she went to Japan and they went into the mountains of Japan. Now, this isn't a conscious woman by most definitions. But she couldn't wait to come back and tell me this. She said, "Umar, I was in Japan. We went up into the spiritual temples of Japan and we sat down in one of the temples waiting for the priest to come out and teach us a little bit about what they believe and what they stand for." She said, "Umar, they walked out of the temples and their skin was just as black as ours. They had gray afros because they were elders." Now, she said the phenotype looked like the modern Asian. But she said the skin was black and they had gray afros, hair standing up on top like Don King. And she said it totally overcame me. They sat down and they began to talk. And she said, I couldn't believe these were black men. They were Japanese, but they were black men.
Did not exist before 1681. Again, white people did not exist on planet Earth until 1681. Number two, any claim that this group called white people, any claim that that group is rooted in biology or derived from genes or biology or is innate or is from nature is a lie. Third and final point, as a matter of foundational law, actually let me say it this way, white supremacy has been embedded in the United States of America from its founding as a matter of law. Now, I don't expect you to buy all that, to get all that, to believe all that, at least not now. But my job is to share with you the legal history that proves each of those three claims that I begin with.
Why did I think that every black person got their enslaver's last name? Descendants of slaves from America, obviously, is who I'm talking about. But why did I think that everybody had the names of their slave master? That's not the case. We all know that a lot of black people got their last names from their enslavers. But what I didn't know was a lot of the common names, Carter, Smith, Taylor, those all came from black people's ancestors' occupations. So in case you didn't know, a carter was a person who transported goods using a cart. A cooper is someone who made or repaired barrels. Smith is in relation to a blacksmith, someone who worked with metal. Tailor refers to a tailor, someone who sews and makes clothing. It's just spelled differently for whatever reason. And then you have names like Freeman, Strong, Young, Brown, Black. These represent exactly what it sounds like. Freeman obviously was the person who got their freedom during slavery, and that was just the last name given to black people during that time so that it could be known that they were free, and that was their free identity. They no longer had a slave identity. And then you have those that took on names that represented their surroundings and geographic locations, such as rivers, banks, woods, hills. Those were names that indicated proximity to nature. Strong is just like it sounds, most likely identifying a person of that stature who portrayed inner strength as well as physical strength. Young, Brown, and Black were names that were given to people to describe their outward appearance. If they looked young, if they were brown, if they were black, those were the names that stuck and were passed down in the family line. And the fourth way was through false documentation, such as the Freedmen Bureau census and things like that, which forced black people to change their last names because they were either spelled wrong, misdocumented, anglicized, etc. And others, after emancipation, rejected their last names and chose their own last names. However, they chose names such as Washington, Lincoln, after predominant figures of their time, which was ironic because, obviously some of them owned slaves, but they still felt some type of prestige to the name and wanted to take after them, rejecting their enslavers. And I'm kind of low-key jealous of y'all because my ancestors just kept their enslavers' last name. It's very Irish. When I was a kid, people would ask me, "Are you related to Michael Jackson?" And I would say, "Yeah, that's my cousin." And he low-key might be. Who knows? I don't know. It's a cool name, but it's just not, we're not connected to our roots. However, it is cool.
How was Beethoven, one of the most revered figures in the history of Western music, described? From Beethoven, the man who freed music. At page 18, we have the description of a young 13 years old Beethoven. Quote, this is her description of the boy himself. Short, stocky, broad shoulders, short neck, thick head, round nose, blackish brown complexion. End quote. In fact, contemporaries claim that Beethoven resembled a Moor more than his renowned master Haydn. From the life of Ludwig van Beethoven, page 146, quote, this small, thin, dark-complexioned, pock-marked, dark-eyed, bewigged young musician of 22 years Beethoven, had quietly journeyed to the capital to pursue the study of his art with a small, thin, dark-complexioned, pock-marked, black-eyed, and bewigged veteran composer, his teacher Haydn. In the well-known anecdote related by Carpani of Haydn's introduction to him, Anton Esterhazy, the prince, is made to call the composer a Moor. Beethoven had even more of the Moor in his looks than his master. His front teeth, owing to the singular flatness of the roof of his mouth, protruded and, of course, thrust out his lips. The nose, too, was rather broad and decidedly flattened, while the forehead was remarkably full and round. From Beethoven, his impressions by his contemporaries. Page 26, quote, "His coal-black hair bristled shaggily about his head. His beard, he had not been shaved for several days, made the lower part of his already brown face still darker," end quote. This is another first-hand account of Beethoven's likeness. There are more, but we would just be beating a dead horse at this point. Beethoven, just like Shakespeare, who we've already covered, and also his teacher Haydn, a revered composer, is yet another victim of the whitewashing of Western figures. He passed away in 1827 in Vienna, even though majority of the black populations in Europe would have left by the early 1800s. We still have accounts of black men in Europe even during the late 1800s. For example, take this painting from the British Museum of Austrian soldiers entering a village during the Napoleonic Wars, same time when Beethoven was alive. If we zoom in at the back of the column, we see a dark-complexioned soldier. It's not a shadow, it's the man's dark skin. We can also see his features. Possibly Beethoven's, quote, black, brownish complexion was similar to this soldier. Like and share for more lost.
But the man who took on the European is called Bimbatha, General Bimbatha, Emperor of the Zulu nation. And you've never heard of General Bimbatha, who slaughtered in one battle more Europeans on that occasion than had ever been killed in a single battle in history before. And it was on the forces of Bimbatha, that is the first time the Gatling gun is used in Africa in recorded history. And in one day's shooting, they killed nearly 30,000 Zulu troops using those weaponry. And once that gun is introduced, the entire war across the continent is changed, and history is altered almost permanently.
How did this history get lost? And of course the answer was it wasn't lost, it was intentionally ignored, it was intentionally dropped. We didn't want you to know that there was this thriving civilization that put lamps up that were powered by petroleum 1,000 years ago, and were doing cataract surgery 1,000 years ago, while Europeans were living in little towns like Paris, where the streets were literally their sewage system. Right? And they would just throw the fecal matter and urine out the window, and it would flow in the rain into the wells, which is why they couldn't drink their water, because you'd just die of cholera and dysentery instantaneously if you did, which meant that during that time period, Europeans could only drink beer and wine, and so they were constantly drunk. But it's okay, they smelled like fecal matter and urine, so it was a way to compensate, I think. That, and they had to wear wool, so they were always walking around itching. And so you smelled like poop and piss, and you're itching, so you might as well be drunk.
On February 17, 1947, around 30 white taxi drivers took 24-year-old Willie Earl, a black man, from a jail and lynched him near Greenville, South Carolina. Willie had been jailed for an alleged assault against a taxi driver. In this case, the men were arrested, and nearly all of them gave statements admitting their participation in the kidnapping, beating, and shooting of Willie Earl. Still, once a trial was held to convict the men of the murder, they were all acquitted by an all-white jury. When Willie's mother attempted to receive compensation for the tragedy under state law, she was denied and told there was no proof her son had been lynched. To stay up on your hidden history, lock in with me. Truly yours, #1 history influencer.
So during slavery and colonialism, the Europeans put all black people, even on the continent of Africa, on a high starch and high fat diet.
High starch and high fat.
They shipped the maize into Africa, which we call corn. They shipped that into Africa. They shipped the breadfruit, which is starch, in the Caribbeans. They put everybody black on the face of the earth on a high starch diet.
What are some of the ramifications of high starch in your...
Well, starch is, by definition, the food that can change your mood and state of consciousness more than any other food.
Can change your mood and state of consciousness
more than any other food. So if I put all the black folks on a high starch diet, which from the slave journals caused bone deformities, pelvic deformities, hair loss, teeth loss, all this is caused by a high starch diet because it turns into sugar very quickly.
Without worrying about black and brown people. They don't dislike black and brown people because we live in the ghetto, we have crime in our communities. They just don't like us, period. Think about this. White people have to make laws in order to be civil, in order to treat black and brown communities fair. So that tells you their true nature is to not treat black and brown people fair. Think about that. Really think about that. They had to make laws in order for them to be fair. They make laws against their own nature. Their own nature is to hate anyone that is not white. Now, that's not all white people, because you have some white people that fought against slavery. You have some white people that held hands with the civil rights fighters in the 60s. You have some white people that do philanthropy work in black and brown communities. So it's not all of them, to be fair, but the vast majority of them, I say, in my opinion, I say about 95% of white people, they indirectly or directly do not like black and brown people, simply because they don't like what they can't understand.
They ate Nat Turner. They would never teach you that part.
It gets worse. Eating black people is just one example of the terrible things that happened after lynchings. People don't know this because schools are being forced to remove books about civil rights and slavery, but lynchings were marketed in newspapers as fun events for the whole family. They take pictures with the body and chop off parts to use as souvenirs and trophies, or burn the bodies and put them outside of their towns to make certain people stay away. The last officially recognized lynching happened in Alabama in 1981 and led to the first state arrest for a lynching since 1913. So where are all the people responsible for the lynchings in between? What children did they raise? What laws did they put in place? And wouldn't it be ironic if they said they were tired of hearing about race? Every time you run from history, you give the evils of the past a new opportunity.
As an Indian, because of African descent, or am I this color because this is the color of my ancestors?
Indian territory is tribes. Like, people be thinking Indians with the Pocahontas looking, that ain't how Indians look. They look like them people in New Orleans.
And all of them had each other's names tattooed on them. Man. And this was when I was younger, I didn't understand it, but then when I started going to New Orleans, like, you know, on tour and shit.
We tried.
The way they are with each other, they love each other a different way than everybody else.
We're going to talk about the black Indians I met that are still alive.
No, go ahead. Let's talk about them. Go ahead.
In New Orleans.
Well, the truth to that lies with the anthropologists, if they tell the truth. Because as they dig into the grounds, they have found people and they know they look like I look.
A few weeks ago, a guy was digging a pool in his backyard in the downtown area of New Orleans. See, New Orleans was smaller one time, and this area was country. And they hit 6 feet down, they hit a casket. What's the casket doing here? It was a cypress casket, cypress wood. Now, you know, when you dig down more than a foot or two in New Orleans, you're going to hit water. Cypress is a tree that's grown in a swamp. It does not rot. The cypress casket has been good for a few hundred years. They found black Indians inside with black artifacts, Indian artifacts. Okay? They said, well, let's dig north instead of that right here. They went north to casket. South hit them, east hit them, west hit them. We found that there's a graveyard, an ancient graveyard that's almost a mile in north, south, east, and west, almost a mile apart, almost. And they found out that since when they weren't able to go any further laterally, like we dig graves, they started digging down, one on top of the other. And they have found so far 20,000 graves, black Indians.
Wow.
Okay? and this is about to hit. It hasn't hit. This happened a few weeks ago. You haven't heard on news yet, but it's going to hit the news because it's going to leak out. They're hushing it right now.
Actually say when the teacher says Christopher Columbus discovered America and he met those Indians here. There were no Indians here when Christopher Columbus got here. There were people from Africa who had been here for over 10,000 years before Christopher Columbus was born. It's time for us to teach our children the truth.